I'm Brad Rein. I'm the National Science Liaison for the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And quite frankly, I've been with the agency, actually the longest serving member of the agency at this point. So we're really pleased to be able to offer this opportunity to you. It's basically our target is really people who've not received grants or have never applied for grants. But obviously it's open to anyone who wants to attend. One of the things we do is, as people know, National Institute of Food and Agriculture is an extramural funding agency. So we don't have our own labs, we don't have our own classrooms. We basically provide grant opportunities and competitive and capacity funds to really enable the people we provide those funds to go out and do the research, the education, and the extension work that we believe will make a difference in the public, the lives of the people we serve. So with that, I'm an ag engineer by background. Like I said, I've been here with the agency a long time. I'm going to be basically leading one of the breakout sessions. And I'll go ahead and introduce that first. I'm going to be leading the breakout session on funding opportunities. So that's going to be a little quick overview of the agency and what we do and the scope of the funding opportunities. And I'm going to walk you through how to search for the funding opportunity that's the best fit for you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leland Dixon, who's going to walk you through some of the logistics, and she will be our moderator for this primary session.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brad. My name is Leland Dixon, and I am the Agricultural and Food Research Initiative Program Coordinator. And for this webinar today, we're going to ask you that everyone is in webinar mode, so you cannot speak. We can't see your cameras. We ask that if you have any questions, to place them in the Q&A so that they can be answered after the general session. And we hope you enjoy. Also for the breakout sessions, I will be posting the links to the breakout sessions in the chat box, as well as in the Q&A. And there will also be a slide with the links to the breakout sessions. This session will also be recorded, and I will also post the link to the web page where this recording will be placed on NIFA's website. And it usually takes about 2 weeks after the webinar for the recording to be posted. Thank you. You're on mute, Brad.
That crazy mute button. All right, thank you, Leland. With that, what I'm going to do next is go ahead and introduce the people that will be presenting, the presenters for both this general session and for the breakout sessions. And I'm going to start with the breakout sessions first. And I'd like to introduce Erin Riley. Erin, can you tell us about yourself and the session you're going to be leading?
Yes, thanks, Bradley. And thank you for everybody who's participating in this program. So my name is Erin Riley. I am a national program leader at NIFA, and I'm in the Division of Community and Education. The portfolio that I manage is the 1994 colleges, which are the tribal colleges, as well as the federally recognized Tribes Extension Program and the New Beginning for Tribal Students Program. And I'll be doing a breakout session that is going to be talking about finding partners.
Great, thank you, Erin. So next I'd like to introduce Dennis Ebadagi. Dennis is going to be leading with the breakout sessions. Dennis, can you introduce yourself and then tell the session you're going to be leading?
I'm Dennis Ebadagi, a national program leader here in NIFA. I manage the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program and small farms. I'll be leading the effort on common mistakes you want to avoid, and Crystal Kyle will be working with me on that.
Thank you, Dennis. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Mark Morado. Mark is going to be the presenter for the general session, and he is also going to be presenting one of the breakout sessions. So Mark, could you introduce yourself and then tell us about your breakout session, and then you can go right into right into your general session presentation.
Thank you, Brad, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Morado, and I've been with the agency now 21 years as initially program director, then national program leader, and now national science liaison of animal production systems. I also serve as the science coordinator for the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative. After the first session and the breakout session, I am going to be covering the funding opportunities in the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, which is the USDA's flagship competitive grant program, and it's our agency's largest competitive grant program. Thank you. So I'll start sharing my screen and get going here on this for you. The first session here in this general session is a presentation that I frequently give on grant writing tips for success, 10 things you must do. And I'll just give you a little bit of background for this. So I put this together, this presentation together based on multiple experiences and insights I've had. So including my previous experience as an applicant, awardee, and a reviewer, and actually I continue to review for a few different agencies, both here in the US and overseas. I've drawn on my experience from in service from leading more than 40 panels over the past 21 years for more than 10 different programs at NIFA, as well as an interagency program with NIH. I've drawn ideas for this presentation from experienced colleagues that I've seen give talks or I've discussed concepts with, and I've drawn on some approaches that I've seen used by highly successful grant applicants. So this presentation is really geared with emphasis on providing information for the novice grant applicant, but it also can serve as a refresher for the more experienced individuals and may provide some new ideas for old hands. One thing I always try to do in this is try to focus mostly on the more generic concepts of grant writing, with understanding that most things are similar for most programs, even within our agency, but also across agencies, whether they're federal agencies or foundations or other sources of grant funding. And I try to avoid the specific items that may be very unique. And I'll try to discuss those back and forth a little bit. So I always like to talk about the acronyms I'm going to use. So you'll hear them here, and then you'll hear me use them again. The first one is RFA. I'll use this quite a bit. Request for applications. In the federal system, we use application instead of proposal as the term. So at NIFA, we release requests for applications or funding announcements. A lot of agencies use RFP, and that's just a request for proposals, same thing as an RFA. Some agencies, funding agencies, will use the term program announcement. Again, these are all synonymous. You know, it's basically a solicitation or a call for proposals. And then NIFA is our agency, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And then the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative that I'm going to be talking about in one of the breakout sessions, but also may mention here, is AFRI. So the first thing you must do in trying to be successful at grant writing is to find the right program for you and your idea. And that is to learn about the main purpose of the program or the funding priorities, and then to determine whether the idea you have for a project or grant fits within the mainstream of the program, or does it fit out on the fringe? Because if it's within the mainstream, it's going to be viewed more highly and more likely to be successful. If it's out on the fringe, it's a harder sell for the project. And I'll tell you that you don't want to waste time applying to the wrong program, because square pegs don't fit in round holes. If you contact the program director and they say, or the program leader, and they say this really doesn't fit, don't bother submitting it anyway, because they know that it's not going to do well and they're telling you it doesn't fit. Sometimes people want to submit the proposal anyway, and it's just extra time that you're spending or wasting trying to make that square peg fit in a round hole. And when we're providing advice, and when program directors and program leaders provide advice as to whether the proposal fits a program or not, we're really trying to be helpful and avoid you wasting your time applying for something that doesn't really fit. And then some of these programs, the ideas may fit, but there may be eligibility restrictions and you're unable to apply to the program because of those eligibility restrictions. And for us, most of our eligibility requirements are determined by Congress when they write the legislation that provides authorization for our programs. And so that's where the eligibility usually comes from, and that applies pretty broadly to other funding agencies. The second thing you must do is become a student of the RFA, and including understanding the main goals of the program or program area priority that you're going to apply to. Again, is, what are those funding priorities and how does your idea fit within that priority? Is it within the mainstream or on the fringe? And then understanding the instructions outlined in the RFA on how to assemble a proposal is critical for putting the proposal together properly. And we'll come back and talk more about this repeatedly. And finally, or overall, I should say, you need to read the RFA. There's a lot of information in there, and most of it's important for assembling a proposal. The third thing you must do is develop a timeline for proposal preparation. And I recommend developing a timeline that allows for completion of a semi-final polished draft at least 4 weeks before submission deadline. 6 to 8 weeks is better than 4 weeks, but at least 4 weeks. And this will become apparent why you need this kind of time when I bring up some other points later on. I can tell you that I've seen over and over again that if proposals that are rushed in their preparation clearly shows during a review process, and the reviewers notice it and they're not kind to the proposals. So allow yourself plenty of time, get started early, and put the time and effort, so you can put the time and effort in that it takes to have a high quality proposal. Understand the criteria for evaluating proposals. All of our RFAs at NIFA include the criteria for evaluating the proposals that the reviewers will use. So if you understand these criteria before you begin preparing your proposal, it provides you with a better understanding of where you should put your greatest efforts during the proposal preparation, but it also allows you to check off that you've hit all of these topics under, for example, scientific merit or relevance to agriculture or project team qualifications and capacity of the institution that you should be addressing in the grant application. The fifth thing that you must do is understand the review process and the reviewers. And reviewers in our agency and some other agencies, but particularly our agencies, the reviewers may be assigned as many as 10 to 20 proposals. And this is a very heavy workload, particularly when you're up over at close to the 20 proposal level. But even 10 proposals is a lot of proposals to review, and it's a lot of work. So if you follow the directions in the RFA, it helps the reviewer to review your proposal. If you don't follow those directions, it makes the reviewers work hard in trying to understand your proposal and follow it. And preparing your proposal logically and clearly, again, it helps the reviewers. Not doing so makes them work hard. And so hopefully you're getting the point that you want to make it easy for the reviewers and you don't want to make it hard for them to read and understand and evaluate your proposal. Because if you make them work hard, your proposal is going to suffer in the evaluation process. Write the proposal logically and clearly. If you organize the proposal according to the outline in the RFA or the evaluation criteria, whichever is most logical. Typically, using the outline that's in the RFA is the best approach. Again, following the prescribed format makes the reviewers happy and more generous. They're reading these 10 to 20 proposals and everything's going along. One proposal after another has the same organization, has the same format and setup, and has all the same documents. And all of a sudden they get one that comes out of left field and is organized completely differently, and they can't figure out where everything is in the proposal. And you're making them, and that proposal's making them work hard. So making the reviewers work hard hurts the proposal, hurts you in the evaluation process. Prepare the budget with a strong justification. And I'm going to say that unreasonable budgets hurt proposals because they create skeptics within the reviewer ranks. And this goes to the applicant's credibility. Some funding agencies, this is part of the review criteria. At our agency at NIFA, we indicate that we want to hear comments on the budget, but that the budget is not to be considered part of the evaluation process. Nevertheless, when an applicant, when a reviewer comes across a proposal with a budget that's completely unreasonable, that reviewer tends to think, what else do they not understand about conducting the project and writing a grant proposal? So we can tell them all we want not to consider that the budget as part of the evaluation criteria, but it gets into their subconscious, and once it's in there, it's hard to get out. So I think it's important to have a reasonable budget, request enough funding to get the work done completely, but don't pad the budget. You don't want to be too ask for too much or too little. You want it to be just like Goldilocks would say, want it to be just right. And of course, keep the budgets within the guidelines in the RFA. Again, in many cases, they're judged on reasonableness. At NIFA, if you exceed the budget guideline, it might not even make it into the review process. So we typically reject proposals that are over, with rare exceptions. If they're over the budget maximum outlined in the RFA, we do not accept them for review. Obtain critical input from experienced and successful colleagues. So, and this is why it's important to have your proposal done well before the deadline, because if you're going to get critical input from a colleague, you need to give them sufficient time to review the proposal for you. And then you need to be able to incorporate their concerns or their comments into your proposal. If you finish your proposal a week before or even 2 weeks before the deadline, you don't have the time to do that. But you want to identify someone to review your proposal who talks frankly, bluntly, and clearly. You don't want someone that beats around the bush and or is going to tell you that your proposal is absolutely wonderful. You want somebody who find someone who has little sympathy for your ego. You want them to tell you accurately what they think about the proposal and where the weaknesses are or the issues are that you can then turn around and try to correct before you submit it. And especially important is you want someone who has been successful in obtaining grants, because if they've been successful in obtaining grants, then they know how to write a good grant proposal. And if they know how to write a good grant proposal, they know what a good grant proposal looks like, and they know where there are weaknesses and strengths in the grant proposal. The next thing you must do is fill out the forms completely and correctly. Make sure you prepared all your required documents, everything from the project summary and a project narrative to all those CVs and current and pending support, and have all those documents ready to go and converted and in the right format, such as converting them to PDF if you're submitting them to NIFA. We require all those documents to be in PDF format. If they are not, then they don't make it through to us from grants.gov. And then finally, you want to allow time for intramural administrative requirements so that it is submitted on time. You may be required by your institutional sponsor projects office to send it over 2 weeks in advance so that they don't have to rush. I can tell you that if you send it to them 3 minutes before the deadline, they're likely to make errors and very simple errors because they're rushing to submit it on time. And I say that because I've actually seen that happen. So keep in mind that a deadline is a deadline is a deadline. If it's beyond the deadline for submission to NIFA, we will not bring it into the program except in cases of natural disasters that close down your institution. So those are the 10 things you must do. However, I have a whole bunch of other miscellaneous tips that I'm going to try to get through. So it's like the 10 things you must do and another 10 things you must do. But, the first is to make sure your project team has all the expertise needed to complete the projects successfully. And if you don't have them on, you need to recruit collaborators or technical consultants as needed. Include letters of support that show that they're willing to do the work if these are required. And then clearly explain who will do what and why. And explain who has the expertise to do certain things and why they're required on the project. And I would strongly recommend that you avoid adding people simply as window dressing so that reviewers don't say it's not clear why this person's even on the proposal, which is a common complaint or criticism. Use acronyms sparingly and make sure you identify them. So acronyms and abbreviations are used to conserve space, but they do so at the expense of clarity. There's very few acronyms that actually improve clarity. You know, the DNA is probably one of the few abbreviations that people understand better than the word, which is deoxyribonucleic acid. But all the others reduce clarity. So you want to avoid their use as much as possible, but sometimes you just need to use them. And consider including an acronym key to which the reader or reviewer can easily refer. They know it's at the beginning. They can't remember what that acronym is, they can flip back to it. I remember the first panel I was on, I saw this come in from a highly successful applicant who was also in a National Academy of Sciences. And it was like, just hit me, you know, could have just knocked me over with a feather, because it was just, I just thought it was a brilliant idea. Let's see if I can get rid of this thing that's popped up on my screen. Write clearly and concisely. For me, it's easier for me to read if I don't come across lots of words in technical literature that have multiple meanings. So like, I prefer to say because instead of since, that instead of which, may instead of might. I have about 15 or 20 of these words that makes it a little bit more boring to read, but it improves clarity. And I always think that I'm not trying to make the New York Times bestseller list. I'm trying to get my points across clearly when I'm writing technical information. And then avoid redundancy, avoid saying the same things over and over again, except when it is critical, absolutely critical to repeat that information. Things like the hypothesis, the goals, the outcomes. You might have to repeat these in multiple places in the proposal, such as the project summary, the project narrative, and so forth. Use highlighting of text sparingly and judiciously. So things, when I say highlighting of text, things like bold, italics, underlining, use of all capitals, different colored fonts now that everything's electronic. These can be very useful in bringing the reader's attention to critical points. But if half the text on each page is highlighted, then the reviewer doesn't focus in on what are the critical points that you're trying to emphasize. Use tables and figures to help illustrate important points, but make sure you explain them. Again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And this is why images and pictures are so critical on web pages, because the readers can understand it much more quickly than reading written text. So don't be afraid to use some tables and figures to make your points and get them across to the readers more effectively. Avoid writing the project narratives densely. You don't want to have these project narratives of 18 pages be nothing but little tiny words scrawled across a page, page after page after page, no figures, no tables, no headings, or very few headings, very little white space, nothing but 18 pages of text. That is really hard to read, and it's kind of deflating to a reviewer who's working on the proposals late at night or on the weekend and has a little time and wants to knock out one more proposal, at least read it in the next hour or hour and a half. And they've got 18 pages of densely written text. Omit the use of external links. Proposals must be self-contained. We tell the reviewers if it's not in the proposal, it's not to be evaluated. Again, what's in the proposal is what you're having evaluated. You can't expect the reviewer to go to a hot link and view a movie that you've created and put outside to circumvent the page limit. Right for both the expert and the novice. So this is where science meets art, I think. So writing for the expert is a science part, and the trick or the art is to get it so that you can write it for both the expert and the novice. So not all reviewers will be experts on your specific proposed topics, but they will all have some expertise to contribute to review of your proposal. Usually I think of this as a combination of the expertise of all three reviewers provides enough expertise to review every facet of the proposal, and sometimes duplicate expertise. But you're never going to get three people that are experts in your specific topic in your proposal. So, but you want to write to show the expert that you are also an expert and that you're up to date on the topic. And you want to write so that the novice can understand the proposal easily. And then to show how important your proposed work is to that novice, because the expert knows that, but the novice may not. And when I say novice, I should say the non-expert, or somebody who has tangential expertise. They're probably not novices. They're probably experts in their own field that's a little bit distant from your proposal. But they certainly have some expertise to contribute. Learn about the review process. I talked about learning the review process previously, but the best way is by experience, and that is serving on panels. And you can contact our agency and put your name in the reviewer database. But my recommendation is that you simply review RFAs to identify programs for which you have the expertise, and then contact the program leader to volunteer and provide, and in doing so, I suggest you provide a very brief description, 2 or 3 sentences, 4 sentences max of your expertise, and then attach a CV. And then repeat this annually as needed. Soon as the RFA comes out, send that information in if you want to provide your expertise to review proposals and learn how to do this. And we're always looking for new reviewers in our various programs. We want a lot of people on the panel that have previous experience, but we always need to have new reviewers that have never reviewed before on the panel, because otherwise you don't get new reviewers into the system. But this is everybody that's ever been on a review panel for the first time says that this is a valuable experience. And for resubmitted proposals, respond to the previous review positively and effectively. So NIFA, we require a one-page response to the previous review for resubmitted proposals, and use that to your advantage in communicating the revisions. This is not something that should be viewed negatively when you resubmit a proposal. In writing this one-page response to previous review, be polite, appreciative, and contrite. Don't be hostile. If you are hostile and you're not polite and appreciative, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Reviewers will give credit to applicants for a response to previous review that is well done. That's my experience over many years and seeing many proposals reviewed. And so I'll just about conclude there. I have one final thought that I'll relay to you, in that a proposal is not a mystery novel. Get to the point quickly, clearly, concisely, and logically. The reviewer shouldn't have to get 5 or 6 or 7 pages deep into the proposal to figure out what you're trying to do. So in my opinion, the first sentence of the proposal should state what the problem is and why it's important to study or to solve. And I always conclude my presentations with this slide. It tells you what you should do if you have questions. The RFAs list program staff, so please use that contact information and contact them. Best way is by email, and you may need to use that email to set up a phone consultation. But at NIFA, we're here to help and provide customer service to our applicants, and we welcome that opportunity. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions we need to answer in the few remaining minutes.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, there are a few questions in the Q&A, and the first one: can people without citizenship, green card, or permanent residency, but who live and work in the US apply for these grants?
So we'll hear about that in the breakouts for some specific programs, but with some exceptions, we are making the awards to the applicant institutions. And so citizenship and permanent residency is not necessarily an issue. In other cases, for example, the AFRI predoctoral fellowships program and postdoctoral fellowships program, the residency, citizenship or permanent residency is a requirement. When we make grants directly to individuals, I believe in essentially all cases that citizenship or permanent residency is a requirement. Person needs to be a U.S. citizen, a national, or a permanent resident to receive a grant directly to them and not through their U.S. institution.
Next question: in reference to avoiding redundancy, can you speak to how applicants should handle application questions that overlap somewhat in the content they address? I encounter this a lot in grant applications and err on the side of redundancy because reviewers may not read each answer completely.
Right. I think if you think it's important to, I think you have to use your best judgment. If it's really important, a hypothesis or a goal or an outcome, that's where you need to be redundant because they might miss something. Critical points, you need to be redundant. Background information, not all of it needs to be repeated over and over again. I've seen whole paragraphs of text repeated unnecessarily when perhaps one sentence of it should have been repeated. So I think you need to use your best judgment to determine what is critical for the reader, that if they overlook the one time it's written, that they will miss the whole point of your application. And that's the type of information that needs to be repeated.
If you're nearing the end of your PhD, can you apply to serve on a panel? Or is the opportunity preferably for completed PhDs only?
Generally speaking, we've discussed this a little bit, and we don't think individuals in a PhD program that haven't finished are ready for serving on grant panels. And we're usually looking at individuals that are in permanent positions, whether they're faculty, industry, government, or on commodity boards or private producers. But I would suggest you look within your institution. A lot of institutions will have internal grant programs, and they will set up grant review panels that are very similar to the way the federal government or other agencies do them. And you might be able to get that initial experience that way.
Can I submit multiple proposals to one program area at the same time?
So again, that's going to be program specific. Within AFRI, we do not have a prohibition with few exceptions. We do not have a prohibition against submitting 2 or more proposals to the same program in the same fiscal year, except for seed grants, or strengthening grants. Certain strengthening grants, you can only be on one of those. But I advise against it because you're splitting your time up. This is not like buying lottery tickets, where you buy more lottery tickets, you increase your chance of winning. It's a lot of time invested, and the more time you put in, the higher quality your one project or proposal will be, and the greater the likelihood it will be that it will be successful. I'll tell you, the reviewers don't like to see multiple proposals from the same individual in the same year. We tell them it's allowed, but again, it's one of those things that once they say it, it's out there, and you can, as program leaders, you can try and pry it out of their brain, but it doesn't always work. I would suggest one proposal only to a program. Put all your eggs in the basket and put your time into that proposal. And then after that one's done, move on to another program and another program at NIFA or another agency.
Any advice or guidance on how much details should be included in the approach, material, and method section? Shall we target the expert or the non-expert? We have received contradictory comments on that from previous submissions.
This is a good question, and it's going to vary by what the reviewer expects, I think, a lot. In AFRI, for standard grants, get 18 pages. So I will say use that to your benefit. My advice is always the technical approaches, the laboratory assays that require a lot of detail, put them towards the end of the application. in the experimental plan, give the bigger overview and refer to those experimental approaches and say, for more details, it's here. And so they don't get lost trying to follow the experimental design or the goals or the outcomes, the big picture of the project plan with the details that may be important, but are separated out. So if somebody wants to look at them, they can look at those.
So thank you, Mark. I think what we're going to do now is, yeah, it's great, a lot of great information and answer questions. You may be able to answer a couple more. What we want to do now is I want to introduce Desiree Rucker, who's our second moderator for this session. She's going to moderate us through the transition and how that's going to work from the general session to the breakout sessions. So Desiree, if you'd like to introduce yourself and then give us your basic direction on how we're going to make that transition.
Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Rucker. I'm a program specialist with NIFA. In the chat, Ms. Leland Dixon has laid out the links for all of the breakout sessions. As soon as she says that it's time to go to those breakout sessions, you're more than welcome to click on one of the links and it will take you right into the next Zoom session. Please be advised that not everyone is going to be able to get into the Zoom room, the breakout session of their choice. So try another session if you're not able to get into one. Because of limited capacity, not everyone will be able to be served. However, you can always contact Dennis Ebadagi, Brad Rein. I'm not going to say anyone else's name and mess it all up. Mark Morado or Aaron Riley directly.
Okay. Thank you, Desi. Mark, I don't know if you want to add take any more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and get ready for this next breakout session and look forward to whoever wants to join me. And I think it's been a great start. And it's, we do these fairly often, but this one's got a lot of interest. I think we haven't done one for a while. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off of here and get on to the next session. So thank you.
Leland, is there anything that you feel we need to answer in very quickly, or should we move on and leave it to your judgment?
Sure. One more question. How much emphasis do reviewers put on preliminary data?
It depends on the grant type. Again, I think this is program specific. In AFRI, the review criteria under scientific merit indicates adequacy and quality of preliminary data. And so this is going to go towards likelihood for success. Now, they will, if it's a high risk, high reward proposal, they might give that expect less on the preliminary data side. But that's for the lack of preliminary data is what makes it high risk, but they see really high reward from completion of the project. And we always want to fund some high risk, high reward projects. Seed grants don't require preliminary data. That's the purpose of the seed grant. So again, this is why I say it's program and grant type specific, and different agencies will have different requirements there. So I think we should run to the next breakout session, and maybe we can answer these another way. So
Thanks.